All right, so in this one, we're going to be going through pricing for your agency. Essentially, what this actually comes down to really is to not do a monthly retainer type structure for your agency. Sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I've not ran with this structure for a very long time. We've been doing longer payment plans upfront, paid in full upfront, and it's tremendously helped the scale of the agency. Also client results in a weird way, which I'm going to get into as well. It's like, this is actually going to help your clients get better results. So essentially the fundamentals is I put 5K a month here, but just don't do a retainer type structure. Here's what I recommend to do instead. And the reason why actually I would say this is because number one, the problem with normal X per month retainer type structures is, first of all, you don't collect that much cash up front. Okay, now if you're running ads, this becomes a problem. So if you do a 2K per month or a 3K per month retainer and you close a new client, you're only going to collect 3K today. It's just like, that's not that great, right? And then you got to wait a month to get the next 3K installment or the next installment, the next installment. Now, if you're running ads, that can become an issue if you're only collecting 3K up front on day one. Because if your CPA is 1,500 and you're collecting 3K on day one, it's like you're at 2X, but factoring in your other costs and whatnot, you might break even or even lose a little bit on day one, which is not the best. So instead, what you want to do is try and collect more up front. So that gives you the ability to scale your ads harder, which again, I'm going to get into how to do that here in a minute. Another thing as well is if a prospect pushes back on your pricing, if you pitch them 3K a month or 5K a month or whatever the number is, and they push back on the 5K, well, the problem is you've got nothing to fall back on now because you've shown them your best hand up front, right? You've shown them your hand basically too early in the sales process. And then finally as well, it's harder to fulfill because if you're on a month to month up front, you've only got really a 30-day period to actually be able to get results. And if you don't, give them some kind or some sign of life in the results that you're getting them, then they're obviously going to drop off from month two. So then from that client, you've only ever collected 3K, which is not good. Now, that can be a fulfillment issue. Like you want your time to value to try and be as soon as possible, as close to the day in which they pay as possible. However, sometimes it's quite difficult. We've really worked on this a lot for our own agency. So we have a very quick time to value. However, sometimes you don't. And so you need to try and keep, the client needs to stay the course so that they actually can get results in month two or month three or whenever it might end up coming, right? So there are a couple of problems with doing the retainer model. Instead, what you want to do is, I would just test it, right? Like don't switch the whole agency to it. I would just try it, but this is what we do. And it works tremendously well. So what we do is we do a project period, okay? So typically 3 to 4 months is what I found to work best. We do 4 months. And what this allows us to do is basically, number one is it allows us to downsell our payment plans if prospects push back on the price. So instead of, leading with 5K per month, for example, instead of leading with that, you would lead with, if you was to do a 4-month project period and you was to do 5K a month, that would be 20K for the 4 months. You would lead with the 20K for 4 months. That's the offer. Then if they push back, now obviously the whole set of like sales stuff you need to do there is like, if they push back on pricing, well, is it a smokescreen? Do they say it's too expensive? Because if they say it's too expensive, obviously that's not the actual price being too expensive. That's a smokescreen for uncertainty on the sales process, on like you actually being the solution that they need, right? But long story short, if it's a real pricing objection, well, if you pitch the 20K, you could potentially downsell all the way down to a 4Pay, which is what you would have pitched up anyway on the other payment plan. But now you've just done that as a kind of like a favor to the prospect, right? So now they look at you as like, oh, they've just done that favor. Okay, so now they're like, oh, maybe I could do the 5K a month. But if you led with the 5K, they may have just gone, oh, that's too much. Then it's like, then what do? You can't, there's nowhere to go, right? But what's more than that is that if you do the 20K up front, as in, using this example, and they push back on the price, well, here's the thing. You might not need to downsell to a 4Pay. Our last month in April, our average cash collection was 44%. Okay. Now we have a multiple 5-figure offer. So 44%, it was pretty good upfront, day one cash, right? And the reason was because people either paid in full or they did a 2Pay. Right? Most either paid in full or did a 2, maybe a 3Pay. And then there was only like maybe 5 or 6 clients that ended up closing last month that actually came in on a 4Pay. Now the 4Pay is like the last resort. That is only really used if they physically don't have any more cash, any more money than what a 4Pay requires, right? So then I close those people on the 4Pay. But that's, again, last resort. Everyone else came in on a 2 or a pay in full. And so you can just imagine if you was able to get with your agency, each month you was to close, say you closed a total of 20 clients for the month. Well, if you close 5 clients out of the 20 and they all paid for 4 months in advance, just imagine just 5 clients paying in full for 4 months upfront. Imagine how much of an impact that would have to your agency revenue each month if you was able to keep that up every single month. Your agency would, depends on like the revenues and whatnot, but you probably increase your agency by at least probably 50% or something if you was to just have 5 to 10 pay in fulls per month. Now, those clients would have came on anyway. And so you got to think, well, if those clients was to come on anyway, I mean, they have the cash to pay in full, but if you don't pitch them the pay in full, then they would have done a month-to-month structure. So instead of that month your agency doing 300K, that month your agency might have only done 200K instead of the 300K, simply because they chose the 4-pay option, because that's just what you presented. You just said, hey, we'll do 5K a month, as opposed to saying, hey, we'll do 20K. Now you've just lost like whatever it would be. I don't know the math, but like I think that would be like 80K or something like that from that month's cash collected for the agency. So you could increase your agency by like 50%, maybe even double if you're like, you know, if you're at 20, 30, 40K a month right now, you could double your agency by closing the same volume of clients just by collecting more upfront. Kind of crazy to think about. And again, when it comes to running ads, that becomes really important because now you're paying to acquire these clients. And so the more you can collect on day one, the better the cash flow is going to be, which means also there's an exponential effect to that in the back end. In that next month, you can invest more into ads next month because of the cash you collected this month. And then that's going to increase your clients close for the following month and then the month after. And it has an exponential effect. Plus, who doesn't want more cash on day one, right? And also, on top of all of that, not only, as I said before, you're going to collect more, you're going to increase your close rate because you're not showing your best hand up front. You're leading with the bigger offer. Then you can downsell to a payment plan that might make more sense for the prospect. That can help close rates at the end of the call, as opposed to, as I say, showing your best hand up front. And then on top of all of that, you're also going to get the client locked in for a 3 to 4 month. I say 3 to 4 months. We do 4 months. I would recommend to do 4 months. I just think it's a better structure. Typically, you can charge more, obviously, for 4 months. And what's more than that is it's easier to deliver results in a 4-month time frame than it is a 3-month time frame, for example, right, on fulfillment. So this goes back to it being actually in the client's best interest to have this structure, because now they're going to be almost forced to stick to the course to actually get the result. Right? Because they know that they're making a commitment to themselves that this is going to be a 4-month thing. Worst case, right? And obviously after the 4 months, you might have the question, what happens there? You just sell them on the continuation and then they can go on to month to month. Your agency should be more of an integral part of what they do, of their business by month 4. So they're not likely to leave. But in the first month, people are very volatile, as you know. And if you have an agency, you probably know that the most common time for a client to drop off is most of the time in the first sort of 3 months. So if you can lock them in for 4 months, then it can kind of force them to stick through maybe the turmoil time with the agency so that they get past that little uncomfortable part. Then they get to the point of actually getting results. Now, if that is the case with you, I would obviously argue as well, use this strategy to keep them on for longer, but also look at your fulfillment and think, why are they going through that, uncertain time and why might they drop off? So just fix your fulfillment. But also, as I say, this forces them to stay on for longer. And then on top of all of that, you also have the ability to make a bold guarantee due to project period being 4 months as well. So the results you can get in a 4-month period is going to be much bigger than the results you can get in a 30-day period. Okay, so then if you're running ads, then you can make a bolder claim on the front end, because you're speaking, the claim you make on the front end is maybe we'll get you XYZ results in the next 4 months or you don't pay. That could be your claim. Now, XYZ results in the next 4 months is going to be a much bigger desirable number than, whatever you could get them in 30 days. Does that make sense? So you've got more leverage on the front end in your marketing as well, if this is how you structure it. So shorter video, but I would highly recommend to test this out and just try it out. And again, worst case scenario, you're going to downsell to what you would have done in the first place anyway, which would have been the month to month. So it's like if you pitch a 20K and they're like, oh my God, I could never do that. You go, no problem. You kind of slowly downsell them and you figure out actually they can do a 5K per month payment plan. Well, then you downsell them to that. And that's what you would have pitched them anyway. So in my opinion, I think you should do this because there's no downside. There's no risk. As I say, if you pitch them the high amount, they can't do it. Well, you end up downselling to what you would have done anyway. But if you pitch them that higher amount, you will get some people who take it. You'll get some people who take a 2-pay. So that's naturally going to increase your cash collected. And then as I say, worst case, you just go back to the month to month anyway, and they close on that. So try it out. Let me know in the comments how it goes. And any other questions, as always, let me know, and I'll see you in the next